Chapter 9 Days at Dakshineswar. Now let us take up the thread of our story. Kali Prasad returned to his home from the pilgrimage like a man lost in God, with heavenly glow playing about him. He lived among his parents, relatives, and old friends, and yet was not of them. If prior to his initiation he had only fragmentary knowledge of the self-shining one, the fuller and more complete perception was now vouchsafed to him. He was now approaching to a stage in his quest for soul where, although the conception of God is that he is infinite and eternal and formless, passing the flaming bounds of space and time, yet the touch of the Master has now convinced him that he can be known and his loving presence can be perceived by a mind attenuated and purified. One of the distinguishing features of the life of Kali Prasad at this time, as before, was the singular emphasis laid on the operation of divine grace as the only thing capable of leading us to salvation. When man ascends and God descends, the mystical opening is grace and nothing but that. His life energy being directly connected to divine energy by his Master, the encumbrances that could not so long be altogether cast off by his very best independent efforts were now gone, and there were no more of any obstructions preventing his spirit from sending forth its pure white light. And herein we notice the necessity for accepting a guru. Even Jesus Christ, who said, "I and my Father are one," had to be baptized by John the Baptist, and Chaitanya accepted the discipleship of Ishwar Puri, although he made known to him the very mantram that he was to tell him. Kali Prasad returned by the afternoon of the next day. In the meantime, there was a great commotion at Rasiklal's house in Hartola, when till noon of that Sunday there was no trace of the boy. Nayantara, the mother, bursting into tears, cried out, "Where is my Kali? Where has he gone?" The neighbors could not give any clue as to the boy's mysterious disappearance. Messengers were sent here and there, but still there was no information. Perhaps the boy had been drowned in the Ganges, so concluded the anxious father. Then suddenly Nayanatara remembered that one day her son had asked her about the direction towards Dakshineswar, and so it occurred to her mind that Kali might have gone there. When she told her husband all about this and pressed him to proceed to Dakshineswar at once in search of Kali Prasad, Rasiklal started forthwith, and no sooner had he reached the place than he learned from Paramahansa Deva that his son had already left for Calcutta. His anxiety was over. Rasiklal, on the eve of his departure from Dakshineswar, requested the saint, "Kali Prasad is my son. Kindly instruct him so that he may become a worldly man in the true sense of the word." But the Paramahansa, that is Ramakrishna, said, "But your son is a great yogi. When the boy himself does not want to marry, it would not be wise for you to force him to do so." "But the greatest duty of a son is to serve his parents, is it not so?" argued Rasiklal, and this pleased the saint. Rasiklal, however, could not realize then that Sri Ramakrishna had already shown Kali Prasad the path towards the service of the Father of the world. Then he returned to Calcutta and was pleased to see his son back to their fold. "Did I not tell you that Kali must have gone to Dakshineswar?" told Nayantara to her husband, and the burden of anxiety was now lifted out of their breast. On the other hand, there began a new chapter in the life of Kali Prasad. Since his return from the pilgrimage, he became somewhat abnormal, feeling an irresistible attraction for the Master, whose compassionate touch brought about a complete change in his mind. As the yearning for Dakshineswara grew intense in him day by day, Kali Prasad began to meditate more and more every night as directed by the Master, and this brought to him every time a host of inspiring visions. Nothing but constant meditation was now desired by him. Even his mind was now diverted from his studies and other household duties. It did not take long for his parents to notice this change in the mind of their son, and they forbade him not to visit Dakshineswar again. But Kali Prasad would invariably slip away unnoticed, hire a boat from the Aharatola Ghat, which in those days cost only 1 anna, and run away to Dakshineswar. Here the Master encouraged the disciple to repeat his visits frequently, assuring him that the passage would be provided. Unless you come here, I become restless for you. But my parents do not like that I should come here. What to do? Well, in that case, the best course for you would be to run away from house without telling anybody anything. But where shall I find the passage every time? Have it from me. These had been the talks between the Master and Kali Prasad. The affectionate words of the Master easily moved Kali Prasad to such an extent that tears would roll down his cheeks. How merciful is the Master! Even the affection of the parents is not free from the tinge of self-interest. But here the thing is just the opposite. He loves me for my own benefit, and he wishes nothing but my spiritual development. This is why the Master always wants to see me. Never did I experience such unmixed affection. Such were the trend of his mind in the earlier days of Kali Prasad's association with the Master Sri Ramakrishna. One day it so happened that he felt an intense desire to repair to Dakshineswar, and as Kali Prasad was about to leave the house, he was prevented by his parents from going to that place and was compelled to remain indoors. The main gate of the house was then bolted up and was locked from outside. The boy found himself helpless, and there was nothing to do but wait. Hours passed till it was afternoon, and Rasiklaw thought that the boy would not leave home, and so he unlocked the door. Kali Prasad at once slipped out unnoticed and ran straight to the ghat, hired a boat, and after a while arrived at Dakshineswar. As he saw Kali Prasad before him, Sri Ramakrishna felt immensely delighted. Kali bowed down at his feet as usual and recounted everything to him about his realizations in course of meditation at home during the past few days. His mind was now somewhat pacified. Sri Ramakrishna then expressed his approval and asked him to continue the process and also to report to him regularly. The boy spent the night with the Master, and it brought immense joy to him. From that time on, proceeding according to the direction and guidance of Sri Ramakrishna, the young aspirant Kali Prasad continued to practice meditation with great zeal. During this period, he acquired a store of potential energy to be used up and converted into kinetic energy later on. His soul now could find no pleasure in limitation. It flapped its wings, as it were, to go beyond limitations and relativity, and to fly in the absolute. He began to say with never satiated craving, "Light, more light." His existence now completely merged with that of his Master, and was now fully impregnated with the divine grace. As Kali Prasad now began to call on Sri Ramakrishna frequently, he accepted him with greater conviction as his sole guide, monitor, and guardian angel. It was during this period of constant meditation that one day so happened that Kali Prasad saw the large, omnipotent eyes of the Lord. Speaking about this strange realization later, Abhedananda writes, "Those two eyes were as wide as the wide heaven, pervading the entire space. Thus, every morning and every night before retiring, I would be absorbed in deep meditation, and there would appear in my vision radiant divine figures, gods and goddesses of various sorts. And as I reported to the Master all about it, he would explain to me the significance of such visions, which according to him were not mere visions, but realizations of the highest order. Each day at Dakshineswar brought new experience and new knowledge to Kali Prasad, and his mind attained to the spiritual consciousness, tasted new pleasure, not only from his association with the Master, but also with other devotees who used to visit frequently and regularly the holy place. Gradually, he acquired the privilege of serving the Master. There were rows of jao trees at the northern side of the Dakshineswar garden, and also a powder magazine. Sri Ramakrishna used to perform his daily morning rites below those trees beside the Ganges. It was at that time Kali Prasad would be permitted to carry his water pot and accompany him. From the Panchavati to the site, the master would walk the distance by leaning on the shoulder of his young disciple, imparting to him various sorts of spiritual lessons. There he would patiently wait till the master finished his rites. Thus he became one with the master's intimate circle. At this period, one day, Kali Prasad heard from the master about his other householder devotees, such as Suresh, Girish, Ram Babu, and Mahendranath Gupta. He also came to know from the master about his other young disciples, such as Narendranath, the future Vivekananda, Babaram, the future Swami Paramananda, and others. One day, when Sri Ramakrishna came to know about his exact address, he instructed Kali Prasad to meet one Diban Majumdar, who resided in the same locality, who was also a great devotee and mentally well developed. A frequent visitor to Dakshineswar, Diban Majumdar had once invited the master to his residence. In those days, the Paramahansa used to visit frequently the houses of Ramkanta Bose, Ram Chandra Dutt, and Simla. The master asked Kali Prasad to come to their place on occasion of his visits there and to pick up thin acquaintance with them. Thus, in the course of his frequent visits to Dakshineswar, Kali Prasad shortly came to be acquainted with almost all the devotees and disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. One day, when Kali Prasad found one of his classmates, Babaram Ghosh, his surprise knew no bounds. He was very much pleased to see his friend there and straightway asked him the reason for his coming to that place. Babaram, too, reciprocated the same question to Kali Prasad, and since then both of them became close spiritual associates. One afternoon, as the two friends were sitting on the banks of the Ganges at Dakshineswar, they fell into conversation about religion and the practice of yoga. The subject delighted Kali Prasad most. Devotion is much superior to yoga. Don't you agree, Kali? No, Babaram. How can one be a devotee of God without first practicing yoga? But that is a kind of spiritual exercise. Devotion is something higher, so far as I have understood. No, if you just ask the master, you will come to know that the practice of yoga means absorbed communion with the Spirit of God. And this is, in fact, the highest form of devotion that one can have. Kali, do tell me something of the nature of the yoga exercise which you practice now. Well, I look upon yoga as nothing but communion with God. You know that the created soul in its worldly condition lives altogether separate from the Supreme Soul. A reconciliation is needed, more than a mere reconciliation, really. A harmonious union is sought and realized. The union with the divinity is the real search of Hindu yoga. It is spiritual unification. It is a consciousness of two in one, duality in unity. This lucid exposition of the yoga philosophy seemed to Babaram as the most original and thoughtful of all he had so far read and heard. How was it that his classmate had got this knowledge at this age? So thought Babaram. Kali Prasad must be far advanced in the practice of yoga, and so it struck him. Years later, in his mature age, when Swami Abhedananda delivered before a talented audience in America in 1920 his famous lectures on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he displayed his thorough mastery on the subject. If anybody interested in higher knowledge and wisdom cares to read these lectures incorporated in his book, Yoga Psychology, he will find the volume helpful to his spiritual life. In this book, Swami Abhedananda gives a rational process by which the transcendental practice ought to be carried on. This book is perhaps the most original and thoughtful of all his writings. We shall discuss more about it later on. Speaking of his early days at Dakshineswar, the Swami writes, "There I met his other disciples, among whom Swami Vivekananda was the most brilliant. I was attracted to him and became his close companion. Frequently I used to discuss with him various abstruse points of metaphysics of India and Europe. With Swami Vivekananda, I studied the Buddhistic philosophy as well as principles of Advaita, or the non-dualistic philosophy of Vedanta. Narendranath, the future Swami Vivekananda, and Kali Prasad, the future Swami Abhedananda, who were destined to appear on the world stage within 1 decade after passing away of the Master, and on whom fell the great task of preaching the universal doctrine of Vedanta and the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna as well, became close spiritual associates, and soon after they were acquainted to each other. What little he was able to gather about the strange life of Narendranath had already fascinated Kali Prasad to such an extent that he was all the more eager to be personally acquainted to him, and who was then regarded by many as the most favorite of the Master, almost as an heir apparent. As he grew towards young manhood, Narendranath became an agnostic, reading Herbert Spencer with great enthusiasm. But whether agnostic or devotee, the search for God was always uppermost in his mind. It was touching to hear him tell how he went from one religious teacher to another, asking, "Sire, have you seen and realized God?" and not receiving the answer he hoped for until he found Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineswar. The same quaint question, when put to his future master, he at once replied, "Verily, my child, I have seen myself and shall show unto thee." The rest of the story is too well known to recount at length. On one occasion, Narendranath himself told him of his struggles to accept this priest of Kali, who worshipped the Terrible One. He, the orthodox agnostic, a product of Western education, to sit at the feet of a superstitious worshipper of idols, it was unthinkable. And yet, in this simple man, Ramakrishna, and in him alone, Vivekananda found that he had what he had been seeking, a living spirituality. If the worship of Kali could produce such purity, such truth, such flaming spirituality, one could only stand before it in reverence. The intellect surrendered, but the instincts did not submit so easily. There was a long, long struggle and endless arguments before he could accept Sri Ramakrishna as his guru. His life was now being turned to the harmony which became his motto afterwards. His mind began to drink deep but quiet draughts of inspiration in the Master's company, which was kindled into reverence and ecstasy. No more of knowledge and analysis. Narendranath, the future Swami Vivekananda, became mad after the Divine Mother. The mother responded to the call of her guileless child, now converted into pure gold by the contact of Sri Ramakrishna. Thus, Narendranath Dutt, the son of Vishwanath Dutt and his wife, was reborn as Swami Vivekananda. He was supposed to have been born by perpetuating the household deity, Vireshwara Mahadeva, just as Kali Prasad was born by the grace of the Divine Mother, Kali. Although Narendranath had the dim, smoldering fire of spirituality in him, it was set ablaze by a few puffs from Sri Ramakrishna. The spiritual fire that was burning in him seemed to consume all the limitations and differentiations in his mind, for the energy of this fire was infinite. After he had an experience which is difficult to explain in words, Narendranath's devotion to his master became intense and sincere. Such words as love and loyalty acquired a new meaning. In him he saw the living embodiment of divinity, whose very body changed with the realization of his ideals. Vivekananda said of him, although he was illiterate, he had the greatest intellect of any one I ever met. This was from one whose scintillating intellect amazed men of outstanding intellectual achievements later in America and Europe. Such was the man whom Kali Prasad met for the first time at Dakshineswar, and from the very first day of their acquaintance, both of them became partners in the sacred task of carrying the message of their master to the four corners of the world. One day they were discussing among themselves about the character of the saint of Dakshineswar. Kali Prasad was somewhat fortunate that Narendranath in this sense, that initially he no longer had such struggles, and it was somewhat easier for him to accept Sri Ramakrishna without any demur. It is not for me to speak about the master's character. What I find in him is a being of shining radiance, the very embodiment of love, of divinity. When Narendranath heard this from Kali Prasad, he was simply struck with wonder at the latter's assessment of Sri Ramakrishna. Yes, Kali, he said without reservation, you are perfectly right. If ideal worship can produce such a character, I bow down before it. They were then sitting in a lonely corner of the Panchavati, the sacred place of their master's sadhana, and as they discussed about this God-man of the modern age, both of them were deeply immersed with the lofty thought about one to whom religion was a matter of experience and not merely belief. The life of their master has clearly shown to the world, beyond any shade of doubt, that man may, here and in this body, become divinely transmuted from the human to superhuman. In Sri Ramakrishna, both of them saw one who lived in the faith. God is the only reality. During the early days of his association with the Master, Kali Prasad witnessed an event of national significance. It was the death of Keshav Chandra Sen, for whom Sri Ramakrishna himself cherished a great love. When the Brahmo leader fell ill, Paramahansa Ramakrishna prayed the Divine Mother for his recovery. He loved Keshav so much. But when he died on the 8th January 1884, Sri Ramakrishna was so grieved at the news that he simply wept for him, saying, here was a man endowed with grand ideas of moral and spiritual character. He was the blessed child of the Divine Mother. No doubt, Keshav Chandra Sen, who was a close contemporary of Sri Ramakrishna, and who himself, since his acquaintance with the saint of Dakshineswar, cherished high esteem for him, was a person of pure morality with a heart as broad as human goodness. With him, faith was the profoundest wisdom and a certainty in everyday life. He lived and died on tense, burning, restless light, which suddenly went down in its fullness and undimmed luster. No wonder, therefore, that Sri Ramakrishna felt so much aggrieved at the death of his great son of India.